It's not possible for us to keep our attention on something through an act of will. The mind is much like the breath. You can't always breathe in. At some point, you have to breathe out. Yeah. I mean, to only breathe in or to only breathe out is a death state, is not a living state. Living involves in breath, out breath, that kind of harmonious in and out. And the same with the mind. We cannot make it stay on an object.
Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David, and welcome to all of our listeners, wherever you're coming from. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and we're at episode 428. And we're so lucky and honored and privileged to have Tahn Pamutto, the Buddhist monk, return to us for a follow-up podcast, questions and conversation. Thank you so much for returning. We're really looking forward to speaking to you today.
Yes, welcome back, and thank you. Big hearty. Here's a virtual hug, and thanks. We were just saying that I got to thinking after your first podcast with us, where you started talking about, finding yourself in the army and lying on the floor and looking at the ceiling and saying that I realized that I didn't want to engage in a life of killing, something like that, and that you left the army, and then we got into kind of how you work with people and a lot of the Buddhist teachings. But I know there was a lot of years there where you were wandering and eating food that people gave you, and sometimes sleeping in the forest and so forth. And you kindly agreed to come back and tell us some of those stories, which I would love to hear, like what you went through and what you were learning and what you were looking for. You were looking for spiritual teachers, and how you found them. Anything like that would be great. But I was also saying before we started the recording that I was thinking that what you're doing, your kind of spiritual mission, seems to have a lot in common with what we're doing too. That someone comes to me, like the gentleman who was on the previous podcast, and he looked great on the outside, and he was a successful, weightlifter and coach, and this big, strong, pleasant guy. He's got his own podcast called Philosophical Weightlifting. And so he had me on his podcast. We had a great podcast. And at the end, he said, well, could you show me how some of the techniques work? And I said, well, sure, if you've got some negative thoughts. And then he gave me 4 of his negative thoughts. And we actually had a session that we recorded then, and we played it as a podcast. But it was so surprising to see this fellow who's kind of got it all. He's in a PhD program, and he's huge and strong and looks delightful. Had his negative feelings in 9 different dimensions, as I recall, were estimated at 70 to 95%, like depression, anxiety, inadequacy, and then that a lot of us are suffering and inside feeling like we're not good enough. And then what we try to do is to guide people to see that the problem is not your faults and flaws, although we all have, everything is flawed, really. But that's not the problem. The problem is this mean voice of beating up on ourselves, and that when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. And it just occurred to me that a lot of the things that your own personal mission has a lot of overlap with that. Your metaphors might be different, and you might be talking to people while they're meditating, but the goals are somewhat similar. And I would also say that when I work with somebody, that I'm looking for two things really. The first is a complete elimination of those negative feelings, although that's never permanent. No one can be happy all the time, but to get them to a place of complete freedom from, where all those feelings go to 0 or 5 or some very low level. But also, I'm looking for something which I would say is more of a spiritual dimension to healing, that has to do with just, I'm sure, concepts that you're familiar with, but just acceptance. And everyone's afraid to accept yourself because it seems like giving in, seems like the death of your dreams, the death of your hopes of becoming special, and then settling and accepting your mediocre self. But when you do it, it's the opposite of what you thought. It's incredibly liberating and freeing. And when you lose yourself, it's just like a cosmic joke, because there was nothing there in the first place. So you didn't really lose anything. You just gained warmth from people you love, and openness, freedom from your jealousies and inadequacies and pressures and fears of failure and stuff. And to me, that's always viewing that as a spiritual dimension, more than just a psychological result of psychological techniques, seems to me to add an awful lot. That's important. And that's about the end of what I had to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, the notion of I've actually had some monks, especially those coming from Asia, kind of confused about what this word spiritual means and the way that we're using it. But to put it into context, the way we use the word spiritual in Western society is because of the way that we lead our lives. We tend to lead our lives in a very materialistic way. And so the way we use spiritual is usually as a contrast to having a very materialistic, a very pragmatic, practical, I only believe in what I can touch kind of view on the world, which often leads us into problems, because it may be that the world can't provide us with happiness, or it may be that there are things that are just fundamentally not going to work, and it's not our fault that we can't get them to work. So the spiritual aspect is just acknowledging that sometimes happiness is not in changing the external world, but it's totally a matter of how we view it, how we approach it, what we tell ourselves about it.
Sounds like cognitive therapy.
Yes, well, as I said, a lot of therapies have come about in the last 100 years, since the Western world has reacquainted itself with Buddhism, and a kind of reacquired a lot of vocabulary around these things, notions, techniques, but even just the notion that happiness is possible. I mean, and as we talked in the last session, it's fundamental to actually practicing the Buddhist path that you believe that somebody could be perfectly happy, but that you do have to change your definition of what happiness is, because that somebody could be perfectly happy by their external circumstances. This is not possible, because there is no amount of money, there is no family, there is no car or food or property that would not change, that would not break down, decay, and become not your property at some point in time. So how could anything make you permanently happy? But if you do acknowledge the spiritual side of things and say that, well, the world is the world, what am I telling myself about it? How am I perceiving it? how am I uh, what am I seeking, and how am I going about seeking it? Yeah, and this is really where we begin to understand unhappiness and where unhappiness comes from, because I said that's more the gist of what we're studying in Buddhist psychology. Again, the belief that happiness is the base state, but that we have to come to understand our unhappiness. To say, how could somebody have everything and be miserable? Well, it must be that everything doesn't actually affect happiness at all.
Awesome. Well, I love that, and I'd love to, if you're willing to hear a little bit about some of your early experiences when you left the army, and you were looking for spiritual teachers, and I think doing a lot of wandering. I think you mentioned there might have been 2 or 3 years, uh, and I'd just love to hear a little about that phase of your life.
I mean, I could try. Maybe the outset will get things going, and then I'll have to rely on you, David, and Rhonda to kind of keep it going. Because the thing is, and this is something I thought of even as I joined the army. I suppose you were in a family reunion and you were looking around and you had all of your grandparents and your uncles and your aunts and all of these people, and you were wondering who you wanted to go and approach and talk to. You would probably choose somebody who had done something very interesting that you wanted to hear more about, right? You would
Mm-hmm.
probably go to somebody who had been in a war, and you'd hear about their time, being a soldier, or somebody who had, gone and traveled in some foreign country. You'd be like, oh, so I hear you went to India or to France and even back when I was in the army, I'm like, well, okay, so there's something there. If you want to actually have stories worth telling, you have to kind of break the norm, yeah? You have to go and do something. And interestingly, you have to abandon the ideas of comfort and security. I think in our society, many people confuse these with happiness. But we actually think of comfort and happiness as two completely different things. Comfort just means you're not in any immediate danger, because it's often quite a neutral experience. And this is what I found growing up, is that I all of my needs were accounted for. I had food and shelter and clothing, just like most most people in our country. Just to a greater degree, we're the most prosperous and healthy that people have ever been in history. I mean, statistically, this is the best time to be alive because you can actually survive. I mean, in terms of wars and diseases and these things, and yet unhappiness is still a fleeting, is still there, and happiness seems to be fleeting. So being comfortable and having a secure and predictable lifestyle, again, if you just look at that, they don't seem to correlate, which is just a weird notion. But so that's basically what I started from, was working out for myself that in order to really live, to explore who I was and my motivations, and to try to get something out of life, I would have to kind of depart from the comfortable, predictable, secure path that had been, laid out for me. And then I ended up joining the army, and as I said, that's where I really learned about depression, and kind of just faced how your lifestyle can really affect your unhappiness. Yeah, you can be doing something that everybody could say is a really good patriotic thing, and that you still feel miserable. But not inherently anything that you do in the army is bad. There's a thing, I don't know if either of you were in the service, any branch of the service.
I did not have to. I was in the the Vietnam War was raging in the late '60s when I was in medical school, And being in medical school gave me the opportunity not to be drafted. The so I was blessed not to have to go to Vietnam.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank-
And
yeah.
Rhonda?
I personally have never been in the military, but my son is an officer in the Air Force.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, I've experienced it through
Yeah.
his experience.
Yeah, you probably have some context. Is like there are many parts of it that are very good.
Hmm.
There's an institution. I mean, if you read the manuals that they give you when you go through basic training, it sounds like the best thing in the world. It's built on loyalty and honor and service and
Right.
patriotism and being willing
Integrity.
to sacrifice.
Hmm.
Yeah, all good things. There's just that one thing that if the person at the top says to go invade that country, you're you're supposed to follow the order,
Yeah.
and moreover, you're supposed to make it work. Which is to say, I was in the army during the beginning of Iraq War, so 2003
Oh,
to 2006,
Oh my goodness.
and this was our individual kind of suffering for each person, and each part of that was you could be told, here's the mission, make it work, and you can tell that there's something wrong with the mission, that you're not being told why and what exactly are we trying to accomplish, and is it even possible. Flipping a country that's been kind of at war for millennia and turning it into a democracy. This is it's a good mission on paper, but what if not a single person who lives there wants it?
yeah.
And how can you get democracy by pointing a gun at somebody?
Right.
Saying, I honor your voice, but in this democracy, you're going to do what I tell you. Is that even a democracy?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. It's like all the components for a really a lifestyle that you could take pride in are there, but the intention could be off. So you say, like, intention leads to our speech and interaction. So if your intention, if your mission is wrong, then even if you're trying your best to do things in a good way, you will still reap suffering.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And that kind of line of inquiry was what led me to kind of, well, being willing to set everything down and say, well, what is it I want to do? I say, well, I want to learn about myself. I want to make some good of this life that I have. And I guess I realized that I was not going to live forever. I realized time is finite. And
You realized that at a pretty young age. I imagine you were in your 20s. Weren't you from 20?
Yes, yeah. I signed up. I guess I was 19 or 20 when I signed up.
Mm-hmm.
But having rockets explode nearby every
Right, that's
day,
Yeah.
it does kind of rattle you. But it's true, and this is something I've talked to many monastics, people who become Buddhist monks and nuns, and this is the one thing that we all have in common, is a recognition of our mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And a recognition of unhappiness, we call dukkha, or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Let me write that down.
And
Recognition of our mortality, and the existence of unhappiness. Is that what you said? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Existence of unhappiness. Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could say there's a spiritual aspect in that. As I realized this, I also realized there was no quick solution. And it's to say that I knew my life was finite. I was mortal. I was going to die. I am going to die. you're going to die. Rhonda's going to die. Everyone's going to die. But that unhappiness might not be just limited to this one life. That because when we go to sleep at night, our consciousness winks off, right? Our suffering also winks off. All the things that we were filled with anxiety about wink off. All the things we were angry about wink off. All the things we really wanted to get wink off. We're unconscious. We wake up the next morning, we're conscious again, and these things gradually reappear. So the notion is, if you don't fix the underlying cause of the unhappiness, then could it reappear in the future? And in this existence, in this life, I'm a male, I'm an American, I have white skin. But if I were to go to sleep and then wake up and I am, Chinese, and I'm in China, and I have different color skin, I'm a woman, would I still suffer? And it's quite obviously, most of the roots of my suffering have nothing to do with me being an American male. They deal with me being, alive, me wanting things and not getting them, me getting things that I don't want. And it's not going to change because they just changed the costume, right? So that's more of the question, like, how do you be okay with whatever life throws you? And how would you, if you understood that that was the program, how would you train yourself to do that?
To accept whatever.
Yeah. Rhonda?
To accept whatever it is that life throws you without the attachment that leads to suffering.
Yeah. So imagine you've just been given the opportunity to retire. You get a very small paycheck, and you can go anywhere. And basically, you are now like a martial artist who devotes all day, every day, day and night, to the refinement of their craft. And your craft is going to be, how can I be okay with whatever life shows me? How can I pursue fundamental, perfect happiness, free of unhappiness? What training regimen would you set for yourself?
Well, I'd want to practice. I'd want to find a teacher I trusted. I'd want to be able to take some breaks so that there are moments of like integrating the lessons. I think those three components.
And lessons, and what kind of teacher would you look for?
Well, you said I'm pursuing martial arts, so I'd want to look for a very experienced teacher. Me personally, a humble teacher who wasn't abusive in their teaching, who didn't want to take advantage of me, who was willing to share their knowledge.
Yeah.
Yep. Who shared their years of study. Someone that I trusted. Yeah.
It's a really good answer. Yes. It's a fundamental component. No matter how long we've been alive, if we realize there's something we want to learn, we have to look for a teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, whether or not we succeed is going to be a lot. Do we have any wisdom about how we choose that teacher?
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand what qualities we want, what skills we want to learn, and we have to find somebody we have faith actually has those qualities.
Right.
So what you're saying is that if you want to learn something, you have to pursue a teacher who would have the good qualities and a teacher to share what they've experienced, to be humble and safe to interact, and who can someone who can share their knowledge with you. And is this kind of what you were looking for when you began to find your unhappiness with your life being in the armed services? Did you go to Iraq, or did you just drop out of the army, or what?
I was in Iraq for about 13 months.
Wow.
About 12 months in Iraq and a month on each side in Kuwait. But I was already on my way out. Say I applied for conscientious objector once I realized I'd had a change of heart, and I knew I wasn't interested in killing. And it was a process that didn't really work at the time. I
Be
think in 2006, three
applying to be a
people.
conscientious objector didn't work?
Yeah, the program was a little, it was malfunctioning. There was a very dire need to have bodies on the ground in Iraq, and it didn't really matter the quality as much as the quantity.
Hmm.
But I did eventually get out, and that kind of left me. I was in that situation. It's like, okay, I've been given early retirement, and now I've got to figure out what it is I'm trying to do, and I've got to find a teacher who can teach me. And actually, I did it in that order. Like first, I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I was like, well, I want to be free and be good with whatever life throws me, and learn every step of the way. And so I bought a backpack and some new hiking shoes, and I set off from the home where my mother was living in New Jersey. And I said, I'll just walk across the country, and I'll just open myself up to whatever the universe is going to show me, and learn whatever lesson will come my way. And a couple hours later, having gone the wrong way, and it's very hard to walk in a linear way in New Jersey. All of the roads tend to loop back on themselves. I had gone 20 miles in the wrong direction, and I eventually got just hopped on a train, passed back through the town where my mother lived, heading the other direction, just to try to get some distance in the direction I wanted to go, and ended up sleeping, trying to sleep on a park bench or a picnic table in a park, until in the middle of the night I was woken to a very familiar sensation of having explosions all around me. And it took me a while to kind of get my bearings of what was going on. But the picnic table was directly under an oak tree, a big sprawling oak tree, and the acorns were showering down all around me like mortar shells. And so my one and only bed was actually in the line of fire.
Wow.
And so after about a day of heat and dehydration, blisters, and almost getting a concussion in the
From the
middle of the night,
acorns. Mm.
I realized I didn't know the first thing about surviving and just getting whatever life threw my way and being okay with it. I had pretty quickly found my way. This is a great way to be miserable, to set out with a bunch of expectations and ideals and no training.
Yeah. I guess that makes me think too that I would want a teacher to have a profound impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking, honestly, thinking about David and the impact that I've had in relationship with him as a teacher, he has had a profound impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you were going on that journey and you woke up with, under the tree and blisters, and did you search for a teacher? I mean, at that point would you identify yourself as your goal being, also studying Buddhism?
I didn't realize that Buddhism existed to a large degree. Like I was vaguely aware of Zen as a concept and the Dalai Lama as a person,
Hmm.
but I hadn't yet made the connection that, well, because it's something that's not really talked about or addressed in America so much, is that, you know, Buddhism is like one of the top world religions. There's could be as many as 1 billion, Buddhists in the world.
Mm.
It is
I
quite
didn't.
unacknowledged.
Mm. I didn't realize there are so many Buddhists, 1 billion.
Well, I mean, that would be the upper limit, but
Mm,
100 million, at the very lower
mhm,
limit, because you have whole countries that are Buddhist.
mhm,
Tibet was one, Bhutan, Thailand, vast majority, 97, 8, 9% Buddhist. Burma,
mhm. Myanmar. Yep. Well,
not to mention that countries like China, with over 1 billion people, um, many of them I mean, oh, until they were not allowed, were card carrying, you know, ethnically Buddhist.
uh-huh.
Um, so
So then
it's
after you woke up on your from the picnic table, what was your next part of your journey?
Was that the first day you were out wandering?
That was day one.
Day one. Okay.
But that's sort of, I guess that's my pattern. I joined the army, looking for discipline and a life I could be proud in, and I realized I had learned a wrong way of doing it. And again, I set out, trying to be free and take whatever life gets me, and I found the worst possible way of doing it would be to go to a REI and buy some brand new hiking boots and just start walking in the middle of New Jersey, of all places. Um, but yeah, I guess at that point I started to refine my thinking, and I said, maybe just any old street in any old state in America might not have what I'm looking for. And so I started to gather up the notion of going to Asia, because I had some vague notion that there would be teachers there. And I started grabbing whatever book I could on spirituality and kind of going through them and trying to populate my mind with ideas and possibilities. What is out there? What are people suggesting as a way to get rid of unhappiness? What seems to resonate? And yeah, because first you have to know what's possible. So I and yeah, I did make it to Asia, and I did wander around.
Which part of Asia?
Yeah, Asia. I mean, I did not go to China, as I'd just been in the army, so I knew there were certain countries I shouldn't go to, or I might disappear.
Right.
But I went to India and Thailand and Japan, Korea. I saw Nepal, um, Taiwan. Actually, many very lovely places to visit, if you're open minded and willing to just walk around.
You're,
And
you're,
I went into temples and I went into mosques and I just explored. Um, but this there's this romantic notion I kind of had. I guess it's something I read in autobiography of a yogi or something. Is that I would get off the train in India, and some bearded man with a turban would come up to me and just kind of tap me on my shoulder, and it's like, finally you're here. I've been waiting. What took you so
Yeah,
long?
mhm.
Come, I will take you to the ashram, and I
that's
will teach
good.
you finally. um no, no, it's actually nobody fixes our problems for us.
Right.
Right, I had to keep learning, and I had to use wisdom and evaluate, what people were offering, and was it did I trust that they had it? Was it something, was it what I was seeking? And there were many things offered, but it wasn't until I encountered traditional Buddhism in Thailand that I saw monastics who, the monastic order was set up to be a kind of layer of society. There are people who want to be business people and they can get into business. There are people who want to be soldiers and they can get into the army. There are people who want to be politicians. They can get into the government. If you don't want something, You need to have a layer of society to go to, or you'll be a homeless or a drug addict or a criminal, right? But monasticism is this layer of society for people who are only interested in what is spiritual and are willing to accept just kind of whatever's left over in terms of material supports. And you see in a country, actually quite vividly, a country like Thailand or Burma, they're not perfect countries by any means. The governments are very faulty. They're very much under threat from hostile governments that are infiltrating them from various directions. And but in terms of average level of happiness, it's just kind of shocking, just how upbeat people are, how much of a feeling of belonging they have, that their society includes a place that they can go. If ever they feel like things are just not working out, they're like, well, I could just be a monk. I could just be a nun. I could just go and live at a temple. And in fact, if somebody, I think we talked about it last time. If a family member dies, they could go stay at a temple for a time. If their house burns down, their whole family could go stay at a temple for a time. There's a part of society that's built completely on the notion of mutual support and generosity, receiving what is extra. But when you have that, many people find that it's a joy to give. So you actually have this layer of society now that's built upon receiving. And so if you want to give to charity, you have this whole, it's like you don't have to research some kind of charitable organization that's trying to help people in some part of the country that you want to help. You have this whole part of your society that's people who are living completely on donations.
Tahn, a lot of people study Buddhism or go on a path. I know I've been to a lot of I've taken a lot of Buddhist courses, mostly in Tibetan Buddhism. But what attracted you to make the commitment from studying Buddhism and being attracted to the traditional Buddhism of Thailand, to making the leap to studying it to such a depth that you would become a monk?
What else am I going to do? I decided this is what I want to do, right? I guess that's what kind of is just kind of different, is that if you realize you're going to die someday, then the question starts to arise is, am I doing what I want to be doing right now? And this is a contemplation. You're talking about techniques, David. This is one of our contemplations in Buddhism, as we call it, Marananusati, or the recollection or contemplation of death. And the average person thinks as little as they can about their own impending death. It seems to be a way to get depressed. You mean everything I accomplish will eventually still lead to the same place? You mean I won't be able to take anything with me? But it's put forth as, well, this is a truth. This is reliable. This is probably the only guarantee you get at birth. Nothing else is guaranteed except this. And so you have something that you can absolutely, if you were to gamble on it, you would always win. Why would you not use that? Why would you not, learn to approach that, embrace that, understand that, and base your decision making off of that? Because that is a truth. It is a reliable fact that you can count on. And but how would you do that? So one of the simple contemplations I ask is to you sit down and you say, suppose I knew right now that I was going to die at the end of today, right? Would I, if that were the case, would I still be doing what I'm doing right now? And it's a very simple contemplation, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no right answer. You're asking yourself, and nobody can tell you the right answer, but it's for you to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put you on the spot, Rhonda, but it's useful to that degree. Like if you're busy loading the dishwasher and grumbling about how nobody ever cleans the dishes, and you ask yourself that question, you're like, would I be doing this right now? If you're researching a new sofa because somebody see you've got a couch behind you, because everybody keeps telling you, isn't it time you get a new couch? And you're just you're scrolling through a website looking for new couches, and you ask yourself, well, if I knew I was going to die today, would I be spending so much time shopping for a new couch?
Right.
It helps frame everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do it once, you just get an answer. But if you keep doing it, what you do is you end up at a lifestyle. It's a self-regulated kind of contemplation. It will show you those things that you're really not attached to, those things that you're actually not really invested in at all, those things that you'd rather not be doing, actually, now that you think about it, but you only do because you think you should. And it kind of filters things. And what precipitates out is you end up with a lifestyle where every time you ask that question, you say yes. And it can even be the most mundane things, like you're just a tidy person, and so I'm here in this cabin, and I see some stuff on the floor, and I go to sweep it up, and I ask myself, if I knew I was going to die tonight, would I still sweep this up? And I'm like, yeah, why not?
Mm-hmm.
It's because it seems like the thing to do. And then the contemplation even turns around, where I'm like, well, wouldn't that be nice? So somebody comes in and they find my corpse kind of, just lying on the floor, but it's a nice clean floor. And so all they have to do is drag me out, and then the place is livable again. And it turns into a source of happiness instead of unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, right now I am doing exactly what I want to be doing at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I mean about an unconditioned happiness. It's simple and it's accessible. So I guess this is what I was trying to find my way towards. Yeah. These contemplations and this training for the mind. Somebody who realized that this was one way that you can get to that destination. And somebody I would trust enough that if they told me this is what you're supposed to do, I would actually do it long enough to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can summarize what you're saying, because I like to keep everything at the fourth grade level, which and you are speaking kind of at that level, but it's still helpful to summarize it to see if we're getting it correct and if the people who are listening are getting it correct. Your goal, rather than a life of killing people in Iraq or wherever, you decided to pursue both peace and happiness. We've talked about happiness primarily today. And one way to live a life of happiness is to contemplate two things. First, that you are going to die, and that everything that you've worked for will also die and eventually disintegrate and disappear, if I got that right. And so you might want to ask yourself one time on one day, if I knew I was going to die tonight, would I be having this conversation with Tahn? And or whatever I'm doing right now? Am I doing what I think I should do, or what I really want to do? And that if you ask that question every day, then you can think in terms of living a life that's based on doing what you want to do, given the fact that this is all we've got right here at this moment. And that was the one of the forms of training that you began to pursue as you were becoming or had already become a Buddhist monk to live your life in that manner to the greatest extent possible. Is that fairly accurate? Or
Yeah, yeah.
and now there's something extremely important that we need to ask you. And Rhonda will now ask the question since I can't think of what to say.
Well, then at a certain point, you became a teacher yourself that people looked to learn the lessons, to learn how to live their life and to be guided. Do you also look for a certain type of student, or what was that process like becoming the teacher?
Well, yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's kind of anybody who starts out as becoming a monastic, wanting to be a teacher, we kind of shut them down right away. Really, I just don't think you get what this is about, because you're giving something up, right? To become the pay is not good being a monastic. You're literally paid in peanuts, and you're guaranteed um, leftovers tossed into a bowl in terms of food. You're guaranteed sleeping at the root of a tree. You're guaranteed scraps of cloth from a bin that you can sew together to make a robe, and you're guaranteed fermented urine as your aspirin, your kind of your basic medicine. And so they were really into that back in ancient India. I've never tried it, but I prefer aspirin itself. Um, and this is all that you're guaranteed when you become a monastic. You're basically you're saying, oh, well, I'll live on what's extra, what's given to me, and so I kind of that's to a large degree that's what I've sought, and I've actually been quite surprised at how much generosity there is in the world, and how much love and support there is for the monastic order, and how much people deeply all would like a teacher, a mentor, a friend, a companion. Yeah. And that no matter how rich we are, this is something that has a greater value than all of our possessions. So I have been well supported. I've been, well fed and well taken care of, and better than I could do for myself, certainly. Um, and that's, but always the intention was to learn, learn the Buddhist teaching, learn about the mind, to develop spiritually. If um, the Buddha actually set out a kind of bracket, for his monks to sort of question themselves in terms of what they were doing, and was it effective, and is asking, am I getting the basic requisites of life, the food, clothing, shelter, and medicine, and am I
Say those
developing
again. The food,
food, shelter,
clothing.
clothing, and medicine?
Okay.
It's nice to just enumerate them. It's like, this is basically what we need. Yeah. Food and water, keeping the sun off of us, keeping the bugs off of us, medicine when we get sick. Yeah. But also, are we developing spiritually? And I have just sought out, what can I learn? How can I keep developing? And this is what monastics do. The Buddhist monastic order is not a stable order. Like we don't have to take a vow of stability. It's based on freedom, so we tend to come and go and travel and seek teachers, seek good places to practice and meditate, whatever works for our particular situation. And because that changes, we were allowed to change with it, and to go and seek whatever fits us best, on a day-to-day basis. And you're only in the order as long as you want to be in the order. The moment you want out, the procedure for getting out is to literally tell somebody who understands the language that you're speaking, I quit. I'm out. I disrobe. I'm no longer a monk. You're no longer a monk, regardless of what you're wearing. Yeah, it's that simple. So you only do it because you want to do it. And to answer your question, Rhonda, is that's all I've been doing. And at some point, I had been doing it long enough that there were people showing up who hadn't been doing it as long, and so they started asking me about it. And so I didn't set myself up as a teacher, but I had to admit at some point I knew more than the people who were just showing up. And so
At the monastery.
At the monastery, or once I started
Or
wondering,
wherever.
yeah, people would show up and they'd have questions like, can you teach me the Dhamma? Can you teach me truth? Can you teach me about spirituality? Can you teach me about meditation? Can you teach me about mindfulness? Teach me how to not get angry, how to not get attached. And I'd say, well, I'll teach you what I found so far.
Let me write that list down. Is that okay? Let me. Can you teach me about? And then you gave a list of
that was not a no. That was just off the cuff.
I know, but it was a good cuff.
Yeah.
Can you teach me about how not to get angry?
Not to get angry.
Truth. How not to get angry. How to find truth. Someone would ask for that. Will you teach me how to find truth? Yeah. How to find truth. What else do they ask you?
Well, for many people, what you find is they haven't yet formulated the questions.
Oh.
A lot of people, and this is actually a very common experience, is they would see me. Like if I was out just wandering the countryside, they would see me and they would immediately associate that event with like this was meant to happen.
Oh, like yeah.
That I had shown up there at this point in their life at that moment, that this was a very important moment for them. And they would often stop whatever they were doing and they would come to me like, so what?
Like when the student is ready, the master or the teacher will appear.
That sort of idea, yeah. But it is two-way. Like if you don't have the question yet, then like Buddhism is also not proselytizing. We don't convert. Right. We're willing to tell everybody about the truth, the realities of existence. This is not necessarily going to be good news. You're going to die someday. How many people are just like, you would find a great number of people are really relieved to hear that. It's like somebody who's been ill for quite a long time and they find out they have cancer. They're usually quite relieved to find out exactly what's wrong with them. In the same way, if you know something seems off and then somebody says, well, you're not going to live forever. You're going to die. You've got to leave it all behind at some point. Like, oh, wow. I've never had anybody put it that way. Never had anybody just acknowledge that. So often we just talk to people and help them kind of find the questions. What is it they're actually seeking? What is it they're actually wanting to learn, to take on? What is ailing them? Because I don't know if we talked about this, but suffering and dukkha is the cause for seeking a way out of suffering. So if you're not suffering, you don't seek a way out of suffering. So
right, exactly.
You have to understand, really contextualize your suffering to know what it is that's motivating you to get out of it.
When I'm doing what I call team cognitive therapy, it certainly that's the most important starting point when I'm working with someone. I generally work with them for a 1-2 hour session and try to complete the treatment in one session. Mm-hmm. And I treat everyone for free and have for 20, 30 years. And initially I empathize. I just try to get inside their head without helping them in any way. And of course they are 100% of the time suffering if they're coming to me, so they have some idea that they are. But the first question is, if, let's say, some magic happens today, and by the end of our session, you have this, you can, ask for a miracle, and a miracle will occur. Let's assume. What
Mm-hmm.
miracle would you be hoping for? And that has to be something very specific. And then we can work with a lot of strategies around that issue. But there has to be something, that they're asking for, that is, reasonable. I'm just babbling here, but it seemed kind of like
Mm-hmm.
you say, what are you seeking? It seems like what's ailing them. It seems like a little bit of the same kind of question. That you need
Yeah,
that as a starting point.
because that's why they ask the question. That's why they show up at your office. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's really important for like a physician, right? Because you're sort of like a mental physician. You're
mm-hmm.
treating ailments. You have to understand the ailment, but then it also gives you like a success, a condition for success.
Yeah.
Once
You
you've
can measure
treated
it.
that ailment, you can send them on their way. And the
Yeah,
person, says, "This is great. I want to stay here." And they start bringing in their toothbrush and their stuff, and want to move in because this is where their problems were solved. They was like, "Well, you don't understand. This was for solving that problem, and it's not something that you're going to just do all the time for the rest of your life. It was for that purpose. So the
yeah,
way we don't go to our doctor every single day."
yeah. That I just tell them I'll give you a lifetime guarantee, a money back guarantee on my work, which was very easy to do, and
Yes.
but that once you find happiness and hopefully the more enlightened dimension, then you would have no reason to keep coming back to me unless you relapse, and you will relapse over and over again. Or you may have a different idea about that, but that's
Mm-hmm.
been my experience. No one can be happy all the time, and when you relapse, your negative thoughts and feelings will come back exactly as before, and probably even more intense. And you'll
Yeah.
suddenly believe that didn't happen. I'm really hopeless. I'm really worthless. It'll never change. And that's when you need to pick up the tools again that I taught
Right.
you, and use them. And each person responds to a different tool. There isn't like
Mm-hmm.
one formula for everybody. And but the goal is for them to just live their life and not keep coming to you week after week after week.
Right.
And I think treating people for free also has some advantages because you don't have any ulterior motive.
Mm-hmm.
The only motive I'll have is to get you happy today, go from tears to laughter. That'll turn me on, but I'm not going to get any money out of this. So there's, no matter how wealthy you might be, there's no gain in coming to see me,
Mm-hmm.
indefinitely. Uh, but that's kind of my basis of functioning for whatever it's worth.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, this is basically what I do. We also everything I know was kind of taught by the Buddha as a teacher, and the Buddha taught it with a complete understanding of his mortality. He wasn't setting up a religion, but he was acquiescing to it. He kind of realized that humans just do religion.
Oh yeah,
So he's
right.
like,
Yeah,
"Okay,
yeah,
look, I know you're probably gonna paint pictures and build statues and temples and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah. I
So this
take it
is
that
one way that you could."
Buddhism as a religion is as kooky as all of the religions,
I mean,
fundamentalist and rigid and superstitious, and
I am an ordained priest, so I will also speak of the
well,
benefits.
well,
Like it has
I take
religions have
back
done.
what I just said, but I just meant that.
Yes, But like the good parts of religion are that they keep something alive through
Yeah,
the
right.
centuries. And so this is
Yeah,
what the Buddha acquiesced to, is like, okay, the religion is a good container, actually.
yeah,
But he was teaching, and he was teaching about unhappiness and the cause of unhappiness and the success condition of being free of that cause of unhappiness, and training people how to get there.
yeah,
And this was what he laid out. And then he died.
yeah.
And basically, he said, well, all things are of the nature to decay. You know, do what you will. And he very much knew that it was each person who did, who was sincerely interested and took it on, could find the same thing that he found, because it existed before he found it. So it was not dependent on him. All you need is a teacher, an inspiration, a kind of roadmap, but then it's up to you to do it.
Hmm.
What was
And
it, in your opinion, that he found, or what have you found, or what if might I find if I were to come to you?
yeah, the cessation of unhappiness. And cessation is a good word for something to cease. In the ancient language of Pali, is synonymous with non-arising. So when something ends, it's also ending into the future. And it ends finally. You know, there's no, because so when we talk about unhappiness, we had the simile of clouds in the sky, right? You can develop a faith that it is possible to have a sky without clouds. Yeah, and this actually, it takes a bit of thinking at first, because for a while you'd be like, well, I mean, the clouds will always come back, right? And I would say, really? Is the sky dependent on clouds? Is the sky affected in any way by the clouds? No, the sky is there, and the clouds enter the sky, and then the clouds leave. The condition for clouds is water vapor, and it actually has nothing to do with the sky. In the same way, our unhappiness is independent of our happiness. Happiness being our base state, a state of peace. You say all we have to do is understand the water vapor, the causes of our unhappiness, and we can make those causes cease.
The You say our unhappiness is independent and a separate dimension from our happiness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
it's not a duality.
yeah,
Yeah,
we see
there is
that.
that which makes us miserable.
Yeah, uh huh. Yeah, this probably seems ridiculously trivial, but I'm, I do quite a bit of statistical analysis of
Mm-hmm.
data is one of the things that I do, and one of the things I found interesting is people think I have a scale for depression that has a 96% accuracy, and also a scale for happiness that has a 97% accuracy. But some people think that these are the opposite ends of the same spectrum. Like
Uh-huh.
plus
Yeah.
100 would be depression, minus 100 would be happiness, but they're not. They're at an angle like this to each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's some relationship, but not terribly huge, and that's true statistically and from a practical point of view as well. I don't know. It's probably a trivial
No,
thing, but
it's
it seemed to map
no, it's
onto what you were
fascinating,
saying.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
I think it
fascinating
is.
that you
Yeah,
could treat somebody's unhappiness and it would not change their happiness,
much.
except the
I
degree that
agree.
they were aware of it.
Yeah, but I've also thought that it might, and that's something I don't know any of the answers to even statistically because we're just trying to analyze the data and come to learn more. But I've also thought that when all your unhappiness goes to zero, you can measure, guilt, shame, anxiety, anger, all these negative feelings. When they go all the way to zero, you're kind of catapulted into an enlightenment state where you do have a tremendous happiness,
Mm-hmm.
a joy, a liberation, but that if you're still somewhat depressed, it kind of prevents that from happening. So
Hmm.
it's not like a linear thing; it's more like a catapult. I don't know.
Right.
That's
Hmm.
probably nonsensical, but
No, no, it's just a matter of terminology, but that's exactly what we describe. With meditation and mindfulness, you're trying to um, remove, excise, kind of pull out all of the causes of distraction, anger, lust, confusion, doubt, uh, restlessness, anxiety, all of these things that are impinging on the mind. They have causes. Often the causes is what we're attending to, what we're habitually thinking about is the cause for these things to
oh yeah, right, of
arise and to
course.
exist.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
Once
yeah,
you treat that, you treat how we are using our attention, most of these cease very quickly because they need that attention, that repeated attention to continue in the mind. Because a thought is much less persistent than a cloud in the sky. I mean, it's there and it's gone. Thought lasts only a moment, and the only things that we can't even register something unless we keep coming back to it. It's not that we're having one thought continuously. It's not even possible for the mind, but it's that we keep returning to the same thought. We
Mm-hmm.
keep having it over and over again, and those are the ones that tend to give us the problems.
Mm-hmm.
do you think that it's more difficult to maintain your attention on one thing, whatever it is, when your eyes are closed or when your eyes are open? Or have you thought about that?
You will find meditation traditions that do it either way. Um, Personally, to get started, I often like to have my eyes a little open because um, it gives me, it just helps orient me in space. Very easy for me to kind of get distracted or kind of go off in daydreaming if I don't
Hmm.
have something tangible. But
Yeah, yeah, right. Like if your eyes are closed, you start daydreaming more readily.
But that's just me. There's some people who are already very interacting with their environment and very cognizant of where they are. For them, it would be better to have their eyes closed. So then they're not like, oh, hey, no, and looking out the window. And
Hmm.
it's just understanding what works for a person. But what has to be done is looking at the attention. Where is the attention going? So this is kind of the basic mindfulness exercise, is to find something that feels comfortable and safe to put your attention on, something kind of neutral like the breath, or steady or heartwarming like a mantra, just a saying that seems comfortable, and repeatedly bringing your attention to it. In
So
doing
when your
that,
attention wanders off, then gently bring it back. Is that right?
well, yes, but even the recognition that it's not possible for us to keep our attention on something through an act of will. The mind is much like the breath. You can't always breathe in. At some point, you
Yeah.
have to breathe out. Yeah. I mean, to only breathe in or to only breathe out is a death state, is not a living state. Living involves in breath, out breath, in breath, out breath, that kind of harmonious in and out. And the same with the mind. We cannot make it stay on an object, but rather we can find this harmonious rhythm where we put it on an object and then we relax, and we put it on the object and then relax, and it becomes a kind of soothing,
Oh, I
comfortable
see.
state,
Yeah.
so that the mind no longer wants to get distracted. It no longer wants to wander, and it no longer wants to go to any other object. What we find is if we attend to any object skillfully and long enough, it becomes beautiful. So most of our life is kind of bland because we're only glancing at it. If we really looked at something deeply and gave it some time, all of its qualities would kind of shine in 8K resolution, and we'd be surprised at how vivid our world could be. And you say this is a state of enlightenment. It was always there. It was a matter of attention.
Waking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually the literal definition of the word Buddha. It just means one who has awakened.
Oh.
And this is what the Buddha, how he described himself, not as a god, not even as a teacher, but it's like, I am one who woke up.
Well, this is great. I have one more question for you, and Rhonda may have some, but you're being very patient with us, which I appreciate, and love your nice, clear, gentle explanations. Is the goal of someone to be end on happiness all the time, or to end on happiness part of the time, and we still have permission to get unhappy frequently?
Well, I mean, even the the idea of permission, right? Yeah, you definitely have permission for life to be what it's going to be. Even the Buddha got sad, at various times in his life, even after his enlightenment. It's
Of course,
his
sometimes sadness can be a joyful feeling of feeling
exactly.
sad
It
for
can
the
be
suffering of
known.
another person and weeping. That to me is maybe the highest state a human being can have.
It can be, yeah, quite beautiful and even ecstatic. To
Yeah,
sincerely just be alive and to have an emotion. Yeah, emotions are not broken inherently. It's more about how we get attached to them. So yeah, because this is what the training is designed for a permanent state of waking up, a permanent state, enlightenment being like light, being a metaphor for consciousness. Is you are awake, you are fully aware of what's going on. Your attention is no longer uh, obsessed or fixated on any one thing. It is
yeah,
unattached, finally.
yeah. Well, early, and I have an answer for your question. You say you ask yourself if you were going to die today,
Mhm.
would you be doing exactly what you're doing? What would you be doing? And what I would be doing and what I would have been doing was talking to Tahn. This was a real great way to spend whatever time I have, and I so much appreciate your joy, your warmth, and your genuineness, and your openness, and your simple straightforwardness. It was a real joy and an honor. Those are kind of fancy dancy words, but it was kick ass seeing you today, and really appreciate
Cool.
you. I'll leave the finale here to you and Rhonda.
No.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, I mean, you're talking about Buddhism as a religion, which it is for a lot, which it is, of course, but it's also, isn't it also kind of a philosophy of how to live your life,
Mm-hmm.
and, providing some guidelines for generosity or right thought, right speech,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
It's just nice to have it explained, right?
Right.
I mean, there
Absolutely.
were some commandments, kind of passed down in the Western world, and they don't say anything terribly different. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet thy brother's wife, thou shalt not something, something, something. I think there was a God other than me. Yeah, I've heard them before, but that was what I took away. Is basically, oh yeah, religion often tells you what not to do, and you can ignore these mandates, and actually nobody will chase you down most of the time, but it's at your own peril.
Hmm.
To kill has negative consequences, to steal has negative consequences, to adulterate has negative consequences, to lie has negative consequences. Some people can be in doubt about these things because somebody, lawyers and politicians and bankers, somebody lies and they seem to
You think
profit.
that?
in the short term.
You think the
There might be one or
politicians
two. I say
lie?
hypothetically.
Yeah, hypothetically, yeah, that's true. They could.
But it might seem like they're getting ahead, but only if you
Yeah,
look at it purely in a materialistic way.
yeah,
But if
right.
you're willing to accept that over time, that will always have negative consequences, and instantly, if you realize that somebody told a lie, what does your opinion of that person do? Immediate nosedive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your
Yeah,
trust for them immediately goes down. And is there could you put a monetary value on that? If somebody were to say, I will pay you X amount of money, but everybody in your life will no longer trust you, would you take that deal? What
Mm.
would X be?
yeah. Well, these days, a lot of people are taking that deal, I'm afraid. Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not. And as I say, so the philosophy part of it, the lifestyle part, is just woven in there. It's like it's a suggestion. If you want
yeah,
to know where your suffering comes from, some of it is really easy to attend to.
yeah,
You know, don't kill, and you will remove a huge amount of suffering. Don't steal, and you probably won't go to jail for stealing. I mean, this is basic causality, right? It's basic.
yeah, absolutely. Rhonda, will you bring this to your beautiful, wise closure?
Well, no, mostly I really want to just thank you for sharing yourself and your wisdom and your experience with us and with our listeners. There's so much common there's so much commonality between, what you've talked about thoughts and how we treat thoughts and believe about and think about, healing by changing the way someone thinks. There's so much similarity between Buddhism and what we do as team therapists that it was really interesting and just feeling like such an honor that you took the time out to share your wisdom with us. And really want to thank you.
Yeah,
Again,
one
thanks for
last
having me.
comparison that I have is that we've I've developed uh, at, at least 140 techniques to help people challenge and crush negative thoughts,
Mhm.
and and because everyone finds a different path, and what works for one person won't work for another person, but a lot of it comes down to the fact that if you're just looking at depression, people are involved in a negative internal dialogue. I'm not good enough. I'm a hopeless case. I shouldn't be so screwed up. I shouldn't be so anxious in social situations. There's something wrong with me. I'm defective. Uh, things like that are very hurtful. They're not only distorted with all or nothing thinking and mental filtering and hidden should statements and emotional reasoning and self blame and discounting the positives and all of the labeling, all this kind of stuff. But they're also unfair or cruel.
Mhm.
And one of the techniques that we use, which is a very gentle technique, is to say to the person, let's imagine that I'm just like you, but I have a different name. I'm like a clone of yours, and but I'm a good friend. But I went to all the schools you went to, and I have all your strengths and all your weaknesses. And would you mind if I talk to you for a minute? And the patient will say, yeah, yeah, no problem. And then you say, I want to describe a problem I've been having, and then you describe the exact problem the patient's been having,
Mhm.
and you also tell them your negative thoughts, which will be exactly the thoughts that the patient told you that they're having, that they're making them feeling so worthless and horrible and hopeless. And then say, what would you say to me? Uh, how would you talk to me? And this technique doesn't work on everyone. It might actually be helpful to a good 50% of people, uh,
Mhm.
but it's and then they start talking to you very differently from the way they're talking to themselves, and in a loving and much more realistic way. And then the question is, since is what you're telling me now true? Oh yes, it's true. And would this be helpful? Oh, yeah, that should be very helpful. So if it's true and helpful for me, and I'm an identical twin of yours, I'm a clone of yours, then it must be true for you too. Is that right? And then if that's so, would you be willing to talk to yourself in that same loving way that you would talk to me, your dear friend? And that's about as simple as kindergarten or first grade right there. But that's in essence, that's all it comes down to. And it's like what you're saying. It's a decision that you make to stop making yourself unhappy. It has to be raised to your conscious awareness that this is how you make yourself unhappy. This is the cause of your unhappiness, and uh, it's surprisingly challenging to lead people to seeing that and then making the decision to stop doing it. But the moment they make that decision, they go whoosh into recovery. Yeah. And that takes maybe 15 or 30 seconds or something. Have you seen something like that also? Or
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's the same deal.
And
Yeah.
it's huge. And it's actually it's a great technique. And this is exactly when in traditional Buddhism, how we teach loving kindness or goodwill as a practice, as a contemplation. You start with yourself.
Yeah, right.
And if you can't have goodwill towards yourself, you will fail consistently to have it for other people.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're in a basic state of being miserable, and it's hard to wish well for others when you're in a depressed state.
Well, I've got 8 pages of notes, 7.5. So I'm going to have a big job to condense all this, but it's just been a fantastic, I don't know, an hour and a half or however long it's been. And I can't thank you enough for coming back to teach us on the one hand, but share yourself on another hand, on the other hand, just to be with us and share some of the stories from your life. Appreciate it. Love you.
Again,
yes.
Thank you for having me. And it's been delightful, and it's useful for your listeners as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. We'll see. I'll let you know when we get some feedback. Email us or email Tahn directly. You'll find his email in the show notes, and let us know what you think. So have a great day, everyone, and remember,
thank you so much.
If you're going to die tonight, get busy right now doing something you enjoy, like what we had the privilege of doing the last 90 minutes or so. Bye.